All right, our next step is to establish relationships and make this skeleton or joint chain functional. Okay, remember we told ourselves that we are going to throw in an IK handle. We are pretty much going to make this into an IK chain, if you will. We also learned that any joint chain that you create by default is already in its FK mode. To convert an FK chain into an IK chain, you have to install an IK handle. So let's go ahead and I'm going to skeleton, say create IK handle, go to the option box. You want to make sure that your sticky is checked, and we are going to choose rotate plane solver. If you remember the difference between the RP or the rotate plane solver and the SC or the single chain solver is that the rotate plane solver allowed me to twist my joints, which is certainly something that we need for the legs. So make sure your current solver is set to rotate plane and make sure your sticky is checked. Then click on the thigh and click on the ankle. And in comes your IK handle, which you can now select and rotate and move up and down and up and down. And now look, your leg bends, which is fantastic. And once again, don't worry about that. That's an issue that Maya 2016 has. But anyways, here's my IK handle. Don't forget to rename the nodes. Ideally, you've created two different nodes. One is your IK handle. Let's call it L foot IK handle. But along with the IK handle comes another node called as the effector, which remembers where the IK handle starts from, where it ends, how many joints does it control. It's an information node. You can either ignore it or you could rename it. Best is to keep yourself clean by renaming all of these. So you have an effector and an IK handle, which is nice. Now, ideally, you don't want your animator to select the IK handle ever. You want the animator to only select controllers. And so instead of having to select the IK handle and make the leg go up and down, we have this controller right here, which we have made already for the animators to select and move. So simply parent the IK handle to the controller, which is your foot controller, like so. And now instead of the IK handle, my animator can simply select the foot controller, and fantastic. Okay, now let's make sure that our K is functional. So when I select my my controller, move it up, my foot controller. Now what I really want is for the bend of my knee to keep pointing towards the K. It's really sort of a unique kind of a relationship. Okay, and we are going to make this happen through a very unique kind of a constraint called as the pole vector constraint. Before I establish it, I want to show you what pole vector really is. So let me quickly bend the knee, select the IK handle, and look at these pole vector attributes. You will never see these pole vector attributes on any objects except for IK handles. Now when I select these pole vectors and move them together, you see how the IK handle kind of twists, my leg kind of twists, which is nice. So the K that I've created, which is my knee controller, is pretty much going to be controlling these pole vector attributes through the pole vector controller. Okay, so that means K is going to be the boss, IK handle is going to be the subordinate. Let's go ahead and establish that pole vector constraint. And now when I select the IK handle, you can see that my pole vector attributes are blue, which is great. Now not only can I bend my leg, I can also twist it. That is great. That is fantastic. Now, two more things that we have to do is we have to set up the foot, or maybe three more things, let's say. Okay, so when I select this and I move this around, you see that the foot pretty much falls off. Are you seeing it? Are you seeing the foot fall off? I don't want it to fall off. I want it to maintain its orientation, and that is particularly happening because when you have an IK handle sitting like this, the IK handle exerts only translational and no rotational control on the joint that it's tipping at. That's my tip joint, that's where my IK handle ends. So that particular joint is only controlled for its translations and not for its rotations. And that's why when I select my controller and try to rotate it, you see the joint doesn't rotate. The IK handle is exerting no rotational control on that joint right there. So what I want is for this controller to exert rotationally control this particular joint. So if I only want rotational control, can you think of a particular constraint that allows me to do that? It's your orient constraint, right? So I'm going to select my controller, then select my joint. Okay, constraint, orient, make sure you go into the option box and check maintain offset, say add, and there you go. Now that joint has blue rotations, which means orient constraint. I can select it, and now when I pull it up, you see my foot's not falling off. It's pretty much obeying my controller. My controller has a good amount of control over the ankle, which is great. Now that is fantastic. It's working beautifully well. There's one more thing I need to happen, is that this guy is going to control the rotations of my toe wiggle. Once again comes the orient constraint. So when my controller rotates, my joint rotates with it, which is great. The third and the last thing that we need to worry about here is when the foot moves up, shouldn't the toe wiggle control go with it? In fact, not only that, when I actually select this and I rotate it like this, like so, let me first parent the toe wiggle controller to the foot control. Let's P. So now, when I select my foot control, you see how my toe wiggle control is going with it. That's exactly how I want, and I can select this and rotate it eventually, which is also pretty awesome. Okay, now try doing this. Try selecting your knee and rotating it. Try bend it. Now rotate your foot. See what happens to the knee. In most cases, your knee control will pretty much go with it as well. It's very difficult for me to keep the orientation of the knee and rotate only the foot. It's incredibly difficult for me to do that, and it's going to be incredibly difficult for you to do it as well. So that means my knee controller should also be parented to the foot. So when I select the foot, move it up, rotate it, the knee pretty much goes with it. That's really simple. That is the end of the left hand side. I'm going to go ahead and do all of this for the right hand side real quick. Okay, I'm going to start out by creating an IK handle, making sure it's an RP IK handle. Sticky is checked. Click on the thigh, click on the ankle, R foot IK handle, but don't forget to rename the effector as well. I'm going to parent this IK handle here to the foot, and in comes my pole vector constraint. Okay, the controller is working just fine now. The foot controller is working fine, but it needs to control the rotation of the ankle. In comes my orient constraint. Toe wiggle controller should also control the rotations of my ball joint. In comes my orient constraint. Parent the toe wiggle controller to the foot controller. Also, don't forget to parent the knee control to the foot control. So not only now does my leg go up and down, it also controls the knee, which is nice. You can now select these two IK handles and simply hide them, because really we don't need to see those IK handles at all. And if you feel like we could do it later on, we could certainly do it later on. So let's keep them for now, in fact, and let's make a whole step out of hiding all these IK handles and cleaning up our rig. The whole video in itself. Let me save this, and that is the end of establishing relationships for the legs.